You're listening to Generation AI
from Live Person.
Welcome to Generation AI. I'm Ruth Zive.
And I'm Joe Bradley.
And we are thrilled to be speaking today with Jessica Popp. Jessica is a proven CTO who has held many impressive positions at Intel, Twilio, most recently at Ada, where I got to know her and feel very privileged to call her a friend. So get ready to listen in to a deep conversation about the future of engineering and consumer experiences amongst all of the AI hype. But before we officially welcome our guest to the show, we'd like to play a one-of-a-kind piece of AI-generated content that Jessica, our team, created specially for you.
In the realm of tech, where brilliance thrives, there's a shining star who truly thrives. Her name is Jessica Popp, a CTO with might, an engineering maestro guiding us to new heights. Jessica Popp, the queen of code, engineering wizard, watch her work unfold. With vision and precision, she leads the way, crafting experiences brighter every day. Her mind's a labyrinth, algorithms entwined, solving puzzles, engineering of every kind. As a CTO, she charts the course, guiding innovation with unyielding force. With each innovation, she breaks new ground, engineering wonders that leave us spellbound. Focused on the consumer, their journey she refines, building experiences where joy always shines.
Come on.
Joy always shines.
What's not to love about that? How'd that make you feel?
I can't even. As someone in engineering, the first thing is, what prompt did you use? What was your prompt? What was the engine?
Gosh, I wish I even knew the answer. That's all drawn from the internet, the interwebs.
I was particularly pleased with the rhyming of thrive with thrive. I thought that was a nice move by the AI.
That was particularly astute, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of cringy but alarming all at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm thrilled to be here, Ruth. Always great to see you. And Joe, great to meet you.
Yeah, let's get into it. So Jessica, you have had quite the career. I know you to be, from having worked with you, a very results-oriented leader. And you absolutely deliver results. I've seen you accelerate project completion by nearly 90%. You've been able to increase team versus customer identified incidents by over 600%. Really, really impressive outcomes. So my question is, what role did AI play here in delivering those results?
In that particular case, to be perfectly honest, it was not a key role, right? So we're talking, over a year ago, not a huge integration point. And, AI or having AI as part of organizations is only a portion of what I do as a technical leader. So those particular projects were really driven more around the best practices around, engineering, customer delivery, customer support, et cetera. So in that case,
I guess a follow-on question then. I mean, impressive that you could deliver those results without AI. Do you find yourself, in the throes of all of this hype, which we'll get to, do you find yourself thinking about how those results could have been enhanced or accelerated by using AI? I know it's something we talk about at Live Person a lot, is how do we sort of integrate AI into everything that we do to drive better efficiency? And we are in many ways an AI company, and the fact that we're not doing that on all fronts is kind of interesting. So wondering if you have a different way of thinking about it now.
Yeah, I think now as I'm looking at it, it's like, what are the tools that are emerging that are going to enhance the software development lifecycle process, and how can they create more accuracy, more efficiency, reduce engineering toil? So we're seeing a huge emergence in the number of tools, and I think we're just at the early adoption of them to see what they are. But I fall in the pragmatist camp. I think they are going to create some efficiencies. They're going to reduce toil, increase accuracy, but I don't think they replace the developer. I think that's exciting to talk about in the far reaching, but it should be about creating more efficiency in what we're doing. But I am very excited.
So I guess then if you were to put yourself on the let's say, risk versus opportunity scale for AI right now? Like, where do you fall on that, or how do you describe that continuum in your thoughts?
Yeah, I think about like the upsides are pretty significant. The risk I lose sleep over is data leakage, right? So as we play with ChatGPT or any of these other models, it's nothing specific about ChatGPT, but if I put in a prompt and I happen to include some IP about my company in the prompt, and that content goes back in to either be looked at by a human for some reinforcement learning or just gets included in a future model to help improve the accuracy. I've accidentally leaked
That's
data out of my
happening
company. And you're seeing that now.
everywhere.
Yes, you're seeing articles on that, right? Companies are like, whoa, let's back up a little bit before we get crazy. And that's why I end up in the pragmatist, like, yes, jump in with both feet, but what's your risk profile?
Well, yeah, I think that's a really important phenomenon, and like really related to the notion of the data underlying the models themselves, and how the ownership and the copyright of that data, should be managed, should have been managed. I guess that's sort of an interesting area too. Like, what are your thoughts there? Do you feel like these things, we should look back and think about maybe a different model, or open internet is okay to train these things? Like, what do you think?
I mean, it's open internet, right? So I think it's absolutely okay to train these things. There's a couple of things I think about though, is we're starting to see emergence of large owners of corpuses of data like Reddit and Stack Overflow saying, hey, that's
Yep.
our data. You made huge progress and you're making money now on the back of our data. I'm like, I mean, this is personal opinion. You put the data out there for me to search and look at and read as an individual human. I've benefited many times over. Most of us have. OpenAI and others took that and took it to the next level. So I don't think there no harm, no foul in that. But then I think this becomes a new open question. And then for me as a consumer, I'm very curious what happens next. Like, this is huge, the opening up of the models. They're too large for most of us in companies to own our own core large language model. But what if we start with that and then we tune it and we bring it in and we have a local model? So I wonder if we'll see more of that over time because it keeps the data within your walls. Maybe you get an update occasionally of a version. Maybe it has fewer parameters, but it's tuned to what you're really trying to solve. And so I'm curious, while it's built on the backbone of that, what it brings for the future.
Yeah.
And then separately, I'm worried about the bias of the data that's out in the open internet. But
Let's talk
that's
more
another
about
question.
that. So what, I think bias is something that probably concerns a lot of us, and maybe should concern us more and more these days. Like, how do you take that problem apart? What worries you there?
So what worries me is, as a leader in engineering, as a female leader in engineering, as someone that lives in the Western world, I'm very aware that that corpus of data represents certain cultures to a large extent, certain viewpoints. And if there's biased data, if there's hateful speech, if there's speech against certain people, classes of people, types of people, whatever, that will show up as fact if it's fed in as data to the model. Right. So how do we make sure we address that? How do we give? And there are companies emerging in this space. Obviously, it's a high focus of the government getting involved in this. But how do we make
it could
those more
even be
balanced? And then as
it
it
could
moves
even be more
globally,
nuanced than that, right? Like, it doesn't even have to be that overt. Like, there's bias that that's unconscious, that we may not even be aware of, that could creep its way into the models and informed decision making. Or when you think about health data, for instance, or certain data sets that are vulnerable to that type of bias, I think that's a completely different proposition that is harder to monitor and control.
Yeah, and does it move from being unconscious to conscious bias because it gets repeated? And now we have a blurred line between what is fact and what is fiction. And I think that's a whole cultural phenomenon, is when we don't know what the facts are anymore, there are no more facts.
I have a question. You mentioned you're a pragmatist. I know this to be the case. I love that about you. I'm also a pragmatist. So when you think about the hype, and there's a lot of hype out there. I mean, you just have to go on really any social media platform, and AI is just very much in your face these days. How do you get past the hype? And what would be a good practical first step from your perspective as an engineering team, as an engineering leader, for a team to sort of start exploiting the value or the opportunity around AI?
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I get a little frustrated with the hype, but it's not against AI. We're a hype culture. So whatever is the bright, shiny object, there's going to be hype about it. And so for me personally, it's like, okay, I love the research. I like where it's going. What can I actually do with it today? So I put less focus into the futures planning of 10, 20 years from now. Like, everybody's a prompt engineer. And say, what can I do today? And so if I were looking at this today, I'd first say, I'd look at the available tool sets that were reasonably available and say, what toil or what risk area could I really address? One I would love to see is, okay, I share my code, or help me write automated tests as I go along. It's one of the worst places we are as engineers. We're terrible about writing tests as we go along. If you could write automated tests in parallel with me while I wrote my code, jackpot. Or if you could write documentation as I wrote my code, amazing. So different areas that would augment beyond the, yes, write a function that does this. And then I would do that. Or even if you're going to use Copilot or something like that, I'd set up an A/B test. Take a couple few Scrum teams and say, okay, you guys are going all in on this for a quarter. Get through the initial, I hate change as humans. I don't want this. I'm smarter than that. Yes, you are. You got to get past the learning curve and get into adoption. And then I would do an A/B test across the two teams and say, after a quarter, did we love this tool? Did it change it? Did it, reduce an ROI or improve an ROI? That's probably how
It's
I would
interesting because you
cool.
bring an
Love that.
engineering and product perspective. I have the same perspective as a marketing leader. I'm thinking about it the same way. How do you sort of accelerate those activities that are time consuming, content? How do you A/B test? I'm thinking about the very same things, but just from a different angle.
Yeah. Yeah, but if I A/B test it and it wasn't any faster because maybe the tool's not mature. I mean,
Totally.
we're still early in this. Then you say, okay, maybe we pause on this one and we
Totally.
go to the next one.
Well, yeah, such like it's like a really interesting test to think about because how much oversight do you put on what the model is creating kind of feeds into the savings that you do or you don't get, right? So if you get a little loosey goosey on the technical documentation and just assume it's all right, you kind of get it for free. But did you, what did you really get for free? Did you get what you paid for? Or did you get something better?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's almost like a business case, right? It's almost like I would want to go to the vendor and be like, give me a quarter. I need to use it and then I need to validate it. It's like any A/B test. What are your acceptance criteria? How accurate was it? Did it just create a draft that was really fast for me to edit? Or did I have to spend almost as much time editing it as I had to spend, as I would have done it from scratch? So look at all those things.
Yeah. What about, so that makes total sense in the engineering domain and kind of within companies. In the product domain, in the consumer facing or even business facing product domain, like how do you separate the real versus the hype? Like, what do you think are the good use cases out there? Or what do you think is probably going to be a while?
In terms of what's being used in consumers
or
right
B2B,
now?
just like sold products.
You're going to turn the question on me. I mean, I think, in the consumer experience world, and Jessica, you and I have talked about this. I think, automation has always been a hot topic. How do you sort of automate more to give customers what they want on demand, self-serve? And I think that's just been taken to the next level with the availability of generative AI and LLMs. But I think in many ways, it's underscored even more so the importance of humans in the loop and access to humans and those, more meaningful high touch experiences when it matters most. And so I don't think we're going to see humans eliminated. I think it's a nonsense to think that humans won't be part of the customer experience. But I do think what we'll see is that the automated piece of that experience will be a lot more elegant, a lot more personalized. We've talked about, as a marketer, I've spun that story for a long time, and I actually think that we're closer to making it real. That's my gut, but would love your perspective, Jessica, because you come at it from a different place.
Yeah. I do. I think about it from a slightly different lens. I look at it now is nobody wants to get left behind, and you would be prudent not to be left behind in this evolution. But that also creates a period of buzzwords. And so I think if I take it from the purchaser persona of all these products we put out in the B2B space, they need to be much more involved in understanding what they're buying. And not buying the buzzwords. So I worry about that for the next 18 to 24 months. Because, what are you stating versus what are you offering underneath that? So I think about it from that perspective. When I think about it from the persona, the actual end user, customer, person in the seat experience, like me, I just, had to return something or whatever, and I'm having a challenge with it and I want connection. I still expect that humans will be involved, right? Like if we look at anyone that manages customer experience, they're going to look at the value their customers are getting out of it. And if we use NPS as a proxy, but let's say NPS starts to fall when they turn the automation up too high. Okay, something's not working for them. And I would fully expect them to dial it back and start to either give feedback or say, what are the use cases this isn't working on, and fine tune that experience to get to what you're talking about. What is the most wonderful blended experience?
I'm smiling because I'm probably the culprit, using the hype and the buzzwords and creating all of the frenzy.
I wasn't going to call out CMOs.
No,
in general.
I've got good self-awareness, but
no.
It's interesting because over the last 6 months, there's been a real sense of urgency to, jump into the conversation, make sure that you're speaking the language and using the buzzwords and positioning along those lines, because everybody there's a lot of frantic energy around this, but I think the dust is starting to settle. And you have to be pointing at real product, you have to be connecting it to business outcomes, and you have to move beyond the hype and the buzzwords. So even though I'm responsible for a lot of that, I also really appreciate what you're saying.
Oh, absolutely. And I know, and I know you have a great product behind it, and there are many great products out there. And I think the buyer persona is very savvy and will be looking for that.
Agreed.
But there's a lot of noise during this period.
Agreed.
I think that's right. And I think there's a lot of people still trying to figure it out on both sides of this equation. But I love what you said before about the notion that we might be closer to models that live inside individual businesses than we think, or than we maybe thought a few months ago. And I think the open source community's kind of playing it out, and that seems like it opens up some really interesting product opportunities. They're maybe a little amorphous right now, but like, how do you make it easy for a business to have a brain that understands its knowledge, right, and is its own? Seems like there's a lot of stuff down that road.
Absolutely. And I mean, I was fortunate enough to work at Ada, where they had a world-class machine learning team. And so it's not something everybody stands up overnight. I do think, if we're talking about, use for models for supporting software development, we may have small ML. I think we'll start to see emerging small ML teams that start to maintain specific use models inside, but there will still be that strata of people that, okay, we're entry level, we kind of understand our models, we've got our base models, and it's going to move up from there for, okay, we know how to fine tune a model, we know how to understand and research this and actually build product on it. I think we're going to see a difference between ML teams that act as operators in an organization to support a business, and ML teams that are actually driving product evolution. And it depends on what you're building.
Yeah. A lot of the challenge with this stuff is measurement and quality understanding, right? So having an in-house function that knows if what you've got in-house is good is kind of part of step one. Maybe that's part of one of those ML teams you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
I
so.
want to ask, you've been doing this for a while. You've been in this space for a while. You've been, product and engineering leader for some years. What surprised you? The world I think the impression is for the average person that all of a sudden AI is a thing. It's accessible, it's available, it's changing the world. The
Mm.
world's going to end. It feels like almost like in an instant, the world changed. But obviously, for those of us who have been in this space for a while, that hasn't been the case. But I'm wondering from your perspective, what has been surprising? What has sort of surprised you over let's say, the last 5 to 10 years, specifically relative to AI?
Specifically relative to AI for me is it really probably starts in with some of the big LLMs that started in about 2017, because I was like, okay, interesting research project, huge amount of compute at Google. That is super exciting. And then seeing the evolution from that into, okay, this is becoming a product for the masses. And so it's a combination of all of the scientific learning and machine learning that's gone on, that stood on the shoulders of the prior generation before. And then the availability and willingness to invest in the compute to make it a reality. So it took some companies with money or VC money saying, okay, we're going to take a chance on this, because it's unlike a lot of the startups we may have worked for. This is a huge upfront investment. And I think that's been a big pivot point that we might not have seen happen 10 plus years ago, that we've seen in the last 5 years. And now that we've done that, I think that's the big leap forward, is like, because I don't even remember how many years ago, but we were all super impressed the first time, we moved away from press one for this, press two.
Have we moved away from that? You sure we've moved away from that?
No, good point. Okay, the first time we experienced something other than that. But now we can experience that across a breadth of conversations, not these teeny tiny little tailored conversations, but let's write a song. Next time I want a sonnet about me. Okay, we could go do that in 5 minutes. I don't even remember what a sonnet is, but I could have one in just a few minutes. And so I think that is a big leap forward. And now it will see a series of, if you will, smaller leaps that make it adaptable and adoptable for us. So now I'm seeing a lot of research papers around, okay, how can we perform just as well with smaller number of parameters, which translates to a smaller amount of compute, which translates to a lower cost to refresh the model, which may eventually translate to being affordable for individual
and a kind of ecosystem of models down the line. Who knows, right? Maybe a wide range of them, and maybe that's a little bit related to your other comments around your concerns about bias, right? Is one mitigator here the fact that there's more than one model, that there's a kind of zoo of models out there, and would that be a good thing or a bad thing?
I think a zoo of models, if we're talking in an open source model, is a good thing, right? Because we're always going to see in the open source community, we're going to see them test against each other. I think now that we're talking about bias, and folks are concerned about how do we manage what comes of this, even beyond bias, but how do we worry about nefarious things that may happen inadvertently? I think we'll start to see tests come out in the open source space to say, here are these list of bias questions. How does your model handle them? And I think eventually, now I'm talking years from now, if I'm a buyer persona in a few years, I'm going to want to see stats and understanding on your model, and why your model isn't biased, why your model is going to support my customers, not offend anyone, be a better contributor to the world. I don't think we're there yet, but I think that's where the thought leaders are going to take it and say, we're not going to put up with models that are biased. We need them.
Well, in fact, I've got a few of those questionnaires on my desk from clients these are definitely questions that people are starting to ask. And I think you're right. I think there's a ways to go before, that is like fully fleshed out and we have like a lot of standards around it. But I think people are, they're kind of not always willing to wait too.
Oh yeah. No, I don't think we should wait on the technology. That's, stand by and watch. But that's great to hear, Joe, that people are already asking those questions.
No, for sure. I think it surprised me how quickly we went from A to B as well. But I agree. I think it's a healthy thing.
Yeah. I think we're seeing the world move beyond the hype. So they're following your lead, Jessica. You know, at the end of the day, every company is pragmatic. They want to
Hardly.
understand, you know, what outcomes are we going to drive and what are the
Yeah.
risks and what are the opportunities. And I think we are seeing the dust start to settle along those lines. I know we're nearing the end of our time. We could probably go on for another hour at least. But I'm going to ask Joe to end with a question that we ask all of our guests so that we can, you know, just see a little bit more into your mind beyond the hype.
All right. This is like a tarot question, right? Well, we're gonna get a deep read on you here. What is something that you wish you could automate, and what is something that you would never automate?
Okay, if I could automate anything, it would be the fully autonomous car.
Wow.
I hate driving, but I love going places. And so that may be the first thing in my life. I'm not generally an early adopter of technology, but that might be the one. I might be willing to be the
and especially out there in, you know, the hills and mountains of Colorado, right? There's wide open spaces. You probably do a little more driving than you like.
No, the traffic of Denver. I'm talking about the traffic of Denver.
I see.
And what would I never want to automate is the experience of being human, the ability to go outside, experience movement, experience nature. Sure, nature sounds during meditation awesome, but no, do not replace being.
You don't want to use an augmented reality set to go and experience your loved ones and all of those places you want to visit. That's we've done. I was going to say we've done that before. We've done that.
We've done.
Yeah, I'd rather see you in person, outside on a mountain.
Exactly.
Agreed.
See?
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Jessica, for doing this, for joining us, for sharing your insights. For me, this was a real pleasure just because I so value our friendship. Joe, I'm glad that you guys are in touch. I'd encourage you both to keep in touch outside of this podcast. I know that you'll come to appreciate Jessica as much as I do. And for all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And please subscribe to the podcast wherever it is that you access your favorite podcasts. And stay tuned for the next episode, which will be dropping very soon.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Thank you so much, Joe. It's my pleasure to be here.
You've been listening to GenerationAI,
Automating Better Business,
a show from LivePerson.
Never miss an episode by subscribing to the show in your favorite podcast player. Please give us a rating, leave a comment, and share the episodes you love. Until next time.